that investigators were able to connect Bryan Kohberger with the scene of the crime through DNA, video surveillance showing his car, and cell phone records. So here's what we know. Xana and Ethan were found on the second floor, and Maddie and Kaylee were found in bed together on the third floor. That's what the PCA shows. Officers noticed a tan leather knife sheath on the bed next to Maddie. A sheath is a cover for the blade of a knife. They figured out it was a K-bar knife with a Marine Corps insignia. The Idaho State Lab found a single source of male DNA on the button of that sheath, which they call the suspect profile. They then compared that DNA to trash that they took from the Kohberger family home in Pennsylvania on December 27th. As you heard Brian mention, he came from Pennsylvania. That's where he was arrested, at his family home. So investigators matched the DNA of the suspect's father from that trash, almost 100% to the DNA on that knife sheath. The affidavit also shows 2 surviving roommates said everyone was home by 2 a.m. and in their rooms by 4 a.m. on the morning of the murders, November 13th, except for Xana Kernodle, one of the victims, who got a DoorDash order delivered at 4 a.m. Officers say Kaylee Gonsalves' dog was there at the time of the crime. She's heard barking several times on security footage from a neighboring home. One roommate who survived says she was woken up around 4 a.m. by noise on the third floor above her. She said it sounded like Kaylee playing with her dog. She heard one of her roommates say, "There's someone here." Investigators say this could have been Xana because she was likely awake and on TikTok at the time. The surviving roommate says she opened her door when she heard crying coming from Xana's room, and then she heard a man say, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." The roommate says she opened her door again. She saw a person in black wearing a mask covering their mouth and nose. She described him as tall, not muscular, but with an athletic build and had bushy eyebrows. So this is the first we are hearing that the surviving roommate, one of the 2 surviving roommates, also saw the suspect in this case. The roommate says he walked past her and she stood in a frozen shock phase. He then left. Investigators believe the homicides happened between 4 and 4:25 a.m. 911 was called around noon, so several hours after the murders allegedly happened, from one of the roommates' phones inside the home. Investigators have reviewed several surveillance videos throughout this, and they say surveillance video from the area showed a white Hyundai Elantra seen near the crime scene multiple times around the time of the murders. Then on November 29th, Washington State University Police learned Bryan Kohberger owned a white Hyundai Elantra. The physical description from his driver's license matched the one that the roommate gave. Kohberger, as we've been reporting, is a PhD student in criminology at Wazoo. Investigators got search warrants for his cell phone records. His phone did not ping towers near the King Road house because investigators believe he turned it off, but it did ping on its way to Moscow and back to Pullman after the murders. His phone records also match the movements of the Hyundai Elantra as seen on surveillance video. Officers also later learned through cell phone records that Kohberger had been by the King Road home at least 12 times leading up to the murders in the months before the murders, in the late evening hours or in the early morning hours. So Brian, again, just learning so many new details today as he made his first appearance in court.
All right, a lot more expected to be coming out, although we won't hear from anyone involved in this case, but we'll wait and see what other court proceedings happen to glean any sort of other information. Thank you very much, Morgan. I really appreciate that. You report live from Moscow. Okay, so as Morgan said and touched on, the probable cause affidavit released today gave us a whole lot of detail as to what happened in those early morning hours on November 13th, both in and around the King Road house and all the way to Pullman, Washington, 10 miles away. The affidavit is the statement of Corporal Brent Payne, a 4-year veteran at the Moscow Police Department. Corporal Payne arrived at the King Road house that Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon, on November 13th, around 4 in the afternoon. For the next 4 pages of that affidavit or so, he described what he saw at the scene and what he was told by the surviving roommates. The DNA that you heard Morgan talk about that was found on the sheath snap, the snap of the sheath that was found in the bed next to Maddie, obviously one of the biggest breaks in the case. The others, as you also heard Morgan mention, the white Hyundai Elantra owned and driven by Kohberger and his cell phone, both with links to his parents in Pennsylvania. The car had Pennsylvania plates until 5 days after the murder. That was when Kohberger allegedly did change his tags, I should say, registering his Elantra in Whitman County, Washington, where he was going to school at Washington State. However, within the school, it was still registered as being from Pennsylvania. His phone, Corporal Payne later learned, was also under his parents' AT&T account in Pennsylvania. And it was these 2 pieces of information, along with those security and traffic cameras in the area, a police officer's instinct about unusual neighborhood traffic, and That cell phone showing up on area towers that helped Moscow police by December 23rd know they had their man and his whereabouts that morning. At 3:26 a.m., a white Hyundai Elantra was seen in Moscow on security cameras, and it was seen on Indian Hills Drive here. And it was followed at 3:26, so by the time it got to about 3:28, he was seen at the intersection of Steiner Road and Highway 95. We assume he went across the street, made it onto Taylor Avenue, and made it in the general area of King Road a few minutes later. That's because at around 4:04, a white Hyundai Elantra was seen multiple times kind of in this area, starting at about 3:29 till about 4:20. What they saw on some of these security cameras was this car pull up here onto King Road, then pull onto Queen Road here, and then eventually make it to this apartment complex, turn around, come back to the intersection at Queen and King, make a three-point turn, turn back around, and find some parking somewhere in this area. Because then what happened was at 4:20, later that morning, just about 15 minutes later, a white Hyundai Elantra was seen speeding out of the area of the King Road apartment complex. Then, beginning at about 5:25, a white Hyundai Elantra, or a sedan that looks just like that, was seen on 5 different security cameras coming through Pullman and also into the Washington State campus. First seen coming up Johnson Road here, then where it hits Bishop, and then onto Stadium Way and made its way into the Washington State campus. It passed Grimes. As we zoom in here and show you there's Nevada Street. It went past Grimes. It was picked up there. It was picked up at Wilson, which is right there, and then it continued all the way around. If you follow this away, it picked up on Cougar just a few minutes later. That road continues all the way around Stadium Way, up to the right, up Valley Road, and then you turn up this place here, right here. This would be the Steptoe Apartments, the home of 28-year-old BRYAN KOHBERGER in this apartment complex right there. 12 days later, on November 25th, the Moscow Police Department asked area law enforcement to be on the lookout for a white Hyundai Elantra. On November 29th, Washington State University Police found a 2015 Hyundai Elantra registered to a student, a 28-year-old BRYAN KOHBERGER, who's a criminology student, a graduate criminology student studying at Washington State. His car was found about a half hour later on that November 29th, right here in this parking lot. His driver's license picture and the information also matched the roommate's description of the man she saw in the house the morning of the murders. That pushed Moscow police to look into KOHBERGER's cell phone data, a number they got after pulling him over for a traffic violation in August. So that brings us to the cell phone data, kind of corroborate what they saw on traffic cameras. So that starts here at 2:42 a.m. on November 13th, the morning of the murders. That cell phone pinged in the area of the Steptoe Village Apartments where KOHBERGER lives. At 2:47, it picks him up leaving his apartment complex and driving south through Pullman on its way, we assume, to Highway 270, which takes you to Moscow. That's this map here. It turns off at 2:47. It doesn't ping on any more cell phone towers. Then 2 hours later, at 4:48, that cell phone pops up again on a cell phone tower just north of Genesee near Blaine in this area. And for the next few minutes or so, from 4:50 to 5:26, they tracked it, moving west toward Uniontown, then back north as it made its way back to Pullman. And then at about 5:30, that cell phone once again pings in Pullman right here on Johnson and Bishop as it made its way back into Pullman and onto the Washington State campus. Hopefully you're able to follow that. And it's worth mentioning this again. Morgan already mentioned it once. But later that day, according to cell phone data, KOHBERGER's phone also showed up in the area of the King Road house. Later that day of the murders, November 13th at 9 a.m., it showed him leaving his apartment and arriving around King Road between 9:12 and 9:21. By 9:32, it showed him back at his apartment in Pullman. So he apparently returned to the scene of the crime the very next morning. Well, I guess just a few hours later. And this wasn't the only time KOHBERGER's phone showed up near the King Road house. A wider historical record request of KOHBERGER's phone showed he visited the area of King Road 12 times prior to the murders, all but one late in the evening or in the early morning hours. One of those times was late August 21st, around 11:30 in the evening, 11:30 p.m., when he was pulled over by a Latah County Sheriff's deputy, where he gave his cell phone number to that deputy. To read the full probable cause affidavit, you can watch the full arraignment as well from this morning and read all of our coverage. Just head to our website at KTVB.com. KTVB.com. We will also continue to follow this, obviously, and bring you more coverage from Moscow coming up in our later newscast tonight and coming in the next several days. For the latest information, as I said, follow us on social, on our website, KTVB.com, and the KTVB app.